Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, where we discuss all things ranging from love, relationships, authenticity, fulfillment, to lessons from plant medicine journeys, inner healing, and living your truth. I'm not your teacher, I'm only your fellow student. Occasionally, you also get to hear some of my own healing process and journey back to love. The point of the program? That you take away at least one actionable piece of knowledge that supports you in expanding whatever aspect of your life your heart most desires. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I will be your host, and I am honored to have you here. Happy listening. All right, welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. I am your host, Cesar Rodriguez, and as usual, I'm actually very excited for the people that are joining me today. Zaina de Gaia is back as the amazing co-host, and we have Jan Edwards as my guest today, and I want to tell you a little bit about Jan. Jan is the founder and CEO of Paving the Way Foundation, an organization committed to empowering communities to be a fierce disruption in the cycle of child trafficking around the globe. This is accomplished through educational programs and training programs that empower communities to break the cycle. Jan spent over 25 years as an executive in sales and marketing, working with organizations like Time Warner, Bright House, the United Nations, and other international groups before taking on the worldwide initiative to prevent children from becoming victims of this silent crime. To date, they've educated over 14,000 children and adults on this subject. Ms. Edwards has been featured in the NBC, the Epic Times, and iHeartRadio for her work in prevention education. Jan was awarded Women on the Rise Community Impact Leader and Orlando Magazine's Women of the Year 2019, and also American Haitian Arts Network Advocate of the Year 2020. Jan is also the writer, director, and producer of the award-winning film Trapped in the Trade, which was featured on CNN. Jan, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. How are you?
I'm amazing. You know what I love about this technology? You're in wherever you are, Costa Rica or Bula Bula or whatever. Dana's down in South Florida, and I'm in Orlando, and we're having a conversation about something really cool. I just,
Here we are.
Yeah. Very
cool. The world, the whole world.
It is. We've got the whole world. We do.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm so excited to be with both of you. Thank you for being here. And Jan, we want to hear just a little bit more about who is Jan Edwards. I've known you. I've had the fortune to know you for quite a few years, and there's a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to that I'd love to hear. Tell us about your life as a civilian, right? Working for Time Warner, marketing executive.
I was in the military at one point.
And take us into how you got to where you got, because it's really fascinating, your background and then where you are now, Jan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm the shorter story, right? The shorter share is how I got to doing what I'm doing, right? Which is educating and preventing human trafficking and child exploitation, right? We could do a whole other podcast about me being part of the Cherokee Nation and being adopted out of the tribe and what I've learned since then, right? So there you go.
Wow.
So 8 years ago, I was invited to the Get Health Summit at the UN. And it was there that I met just this extraordinary man. His name's Dr. Mahari. He's a neurologist out of Tennessee. And, everybody's been to a conference or heard someone speak, and you're like, I got to talk to that person. Like, you just feel a connection. That's who this guy was for me. And we just exchanged cards and exchanged a couple of emails, exchanged a couple of texts. And, we finally got to him, like, I'm so looking forward to connecting with you. He's like, well, we're going to Ethiopia next month. It'll have to be after that. I'm like, great, have a good time, send pictures. He sends me an email right back and goes, do you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
It's not every day you get invited to go to Ethiopia. right? And I'm sitting there at lunch, looking at my phone, and I looked up. My mom was across from me, and my daughter's next to me. And I go, I just got invited to go to Ethiopia. And my mom, being a mom, you're not going, are you? Danger, keeping your kids safe. I totally got the world of that. And then my daughter's like, you're going, right? My daughter's always been my biggest cheerleader inside this environment that I've taken on. And I went home, did the math, and booked my flight. And it was there that I witnessed my first experience of human trafficking. It was just a moment in time. Like, I can close my eyes and literally still see it. For anyone that's listening to your podcast that's ever been on a mission trip, they're going to totally resonate with what I'm about to say. And if you've never been on a mission trip, you've got to get, at the end of the day, you've given your heart, your soul, your body, your mind, everything to, making a difference out in a community for 14 hours, and you're done. You're just tapped out. You don't want to talk to anybody. All you want is some water, some food, a shower, and bed. That's all you want. And so I'm looking out the window of the little van that's bringing us back. We were on a medical mission at the time. I looked out the window and I saw 2 older men and 2 younger girls. And it just didn't feel right. That feeling when stuff's off? It's like, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but it's that thing. It was that. And when I got to my sponsor's house, I shared with him what I saw. And he goes, oh, yeah, human trafficking. And I'm like, hang on a second. I go, what are you talking about? He's looking at me like I got 3 heads. He's like, Jan, we have 4.5 million orphans in Ethiopia. We're the number 1 source of human trafficking to the Middle East. Like, where you been? Right. And I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around what the guy's saying. And I said, hang on a second. I said, you're telling me people are selling people? And he looks at me again incredulously. He said, Jan, it's a $150 billion industry. Like, he just couldn't get that I'd never heard. And I'm like, dude, I live in the happiest place on earth. Right? You live in the Sunshine State. We don't talk about stuff like this. And it was really, quite frankly, right there that God put it on my heart. And I came home and I did some research, and that's when I found out Florida has the 3rd highest number of calls to the National Trafficking Hotline, behind California and Texas. And I'm like, you know what?
Hotline is
trafficking. Yeah, we'll get to that. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. And I'm like, you know what, Ethiopia, I'm coming to you. I'm coming for you, but I got to fix my own backyard first. And that's really what launched this quest. And I am a businesswoman. I ran multi-million-dollar line items for some of the largest Fortune 500 companies right in the country. So my brain thinks business, right? So it's like looking for how do I solve this problem? And one of my favorite questions, also this will sound familiar to both of you, what's missing, the presence of which will make a difference, right?
Yes.
And I talked to local law enforcement. I talked to undercover police officers. I talked to the FBI. I talked to Homeland Security and survivors. And I asked them all the same question. They all told me awareness. People have no idea this is happening. No, well, my background is in marketing and advertising. I worked for, Time Warner for almost 20 years. That's something I could do. Like, I don't have the heart to, rescue people. I can be part of it, but I just can't. It would literally hurt my heart too much, right? But you know what I can do? I can educate people about it. And the more I started learning about what was happening, I'm like, okay, hang on a second. The mental, emotional, spiritual, physical harm that is done to people that are trafficked, there's no getting over that. It's not like a cold. You live with that trauma. It's in your cells for the rest of your life. I'm like, hang on, if we can prevent that, that seems to be a smarter use of our time and energy and money. Now, it's not sexy. There's a couple of very large organizations that raise millions of dollars every year because they rescue kids and rescue people. Needed. Do not get me wrong. It's needed. However, I'm going to go back to millions of dollars to rescue, restore, rehabilitate, and reintegrate versus dollars to prevent. It's not sexy, but it saves lives, and it sure saves a whole lot of heartache, not to mention finances. So that's what we've been doing ever since. We've educated over 14,000 kids all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, including some families in the Bahamas. So we're international, which is kind of cool. And part of the process, that got us here was me really committed to our kids having a say in how life goes. Like really, regardless of the circumstances. And the thing that's been fascinating for me in educating our kids is, one, they're hungry for this information. They're hungry for it. They so appreciate someone coming in and having this kind of hard and uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
And it really resonates with them. Like, they really take on, look, I could prevent this. I could be a hero. I could save someone's life too. Out of it's the right thing to do, not out of obligation or not out of anything else. Because once they see what happens and they get a sense of it, it alters the whole conversation. They'll go home and talk to their parents. They'll talk to their friends. They talk to their siblings. So that's the piece that I think so remarkable is, parents are so fearful of having this conversation with their kids. And I'm over here, they're on the edge of their seats. They're ready for it. They're craving it. And so when they go home and talk to their parents, it's a whole new world for parents going, oh my God, now I really do have to be prepared. So that's why we've created a whole different curriculum for parents. So we've got kids coming home, talking to parents that at least have a sense of what their kids are talking about. And then they can actually have this open dialogue.
Yes.
And to me, that's everything as a parent. It's super easy to do the wandering finger of blame. You should have known. Why didn't you know? I told you before, on and on and on, where we've really, it's having the kids discover it for themselves, and then they own it. Then it's theirs. Can't take it away from them. And then they get to share it and give it away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You can tell I really kind of like what I do.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I love about you is your passion, and even more so, like, your high spirit. That was my main motivation for inviting you to have the conversation that we're going to have today, which is around giving space to the darkness, right? I'm going to refer to darkness as to different things, right? Like maybe some of the things that are going on in the world that are hard to be with, right? Are hard to stomach. And we'll also talk about darkness within ourselves, right? Or darkness within our people in our lives, right? And giving space to that. And why I thought about you specifically is because you are very involved in one of the things that, if you'd ask me, is like one of the most heinous things that goes on. And you're in that conversation on a daily basis, right? You talk to people that are boots on the ground, and then I interact with you, I talk with you, and you're like the joy of the world, and I need, and I'm like,
light of the world.
Lightness,
right,
joy.
Exactly. So I said to myself, I need to ask Jan, how do you do it, Jan? How do you do it? Because I want to know, and listeners want to know.
Somebody asked me about my secret sauce earlier today, and I'm like, God's my one word answer, right? And if you don't believe in God, that's okay. That's my answer for me. People say that all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, how can you be with that? And I'm like, look, I'm saving lives. I'm on the front end, right? Because I know what's happening, because I have friends that are in law enforcement. I have friends that are survivor warriors. I have friends that, work in the rehabilitation, reintegration space. So, I'm like Switzerland. I tell people I'm like Switzerland. We have relationships with everybody. So if I get a Facebook message, or I get a text message, or I get a WhatsApp call, or I get a telegram, all the new platforms, right? That I can take an action immediately and point them in the right direction, right? So in my world, I'm super fulfilled because I'm on the front end. But because of what we do, and because I'm very clear about my lane, we educate people. It's what we do. It's all we do. I'm not a threat to people. And if I am, that's on them, not me. Right. And I'm a collaborator because I want people to win. So, stuff comes up. I'm like, no, that's so-and-so. You need to talk to them, right? That's their bailiwick. I don't do that. And I can hear the confusion on the other end of the voice. When I see grants that are available for other organizations, I email it to people, and I'm sure they're over here going, like, look, it's not my lane. Why would I even think about competing with you for that? Because it's got nothing to do with what I do, So I've really established our organization, and our teams really established a reputation of, we're clear on what we do. We're succinct in our messaging, and we really are committed to collaborating with people so everybody wins. So that's really part of what has me be so fulfilled is when I'm literally saving lives. We trained 350 kids in a middle school 2 years ago now, and we did it was 2 weeks, over a 2-week period of time. And within 7 days of my last training, this little girl had got a request on her phone for an inappropriate picture. And she immediately told her parents. They called the police. They called the school administrator, and they got the guy, right?
Wow.
And she said, I knew exactly what to do because of Miss Jan's training.
Wow.
That saved a life, because the conversation we have with the kids is the moment you take a picture and it leaves your phone, you can't get it back. There's no getting that back. And colleges and businesses and recruiters look at your social media.
Yeah.
It's really simple for someone to take that inappropriate picture the child put, 5 years ago on their social media, and that would literally damage their future for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So we really spend time having kids doing the critical thinking that, in my opinion, is missing in our current education system. So we have them think. And I think that's one of the things that has our curriculum really resonate with the kids is we have dialogue, we have conversations, right? I ask questions, they do the thinking, and then we, discover it together.
Right. Okay. So you would get a certain level of fulfillment from seeing the results, knowing they're making a difference, knowing you're saving lives.
Yeah.
And it still leaves me with, how do you deal with those moments though, where you're talking to one of your survivor warriors and they tell you the story, right? And then
just be with it.
Yeah.
You just be with it. There was a little girl. I went up and had a conversation with one of the community colleges. Here's a little girl. She came in about 3/4 of the way through the presentation, about 7 months pregnant, and she asked some really poignant questions. And I had a funny feeling, right? I'm like, she's asking a little bit too specific of a question, right? And I said, she said, can I talk to you? I said, sure. And I said, well, let's go, have a snack. So I did. And she thanked me profusely for having the conversation. She said, I just recently left for life. I'm like, okay. She was probably 18, and she shared with me that her mom abandoned her in the Dominican Republic. So she moved up here and moved in with her dad. Her dad worked all the time. So, how 16-year-old brain works. Well, maybe I'll get a job so my dad won't have to work so hard, right? Being helpful. And went to work for a strip club. And within a couple of months, now mind you, she was a minor. Strip club hired her. Okay. A couple months in, guys like, hey, do you want to make more money? Started pimping her out. And I said, well, what had you choose to leave? Because there's no rescuing, by the way. They choose to leave. And she said the second time the guy held a gun to my head while I was pregnant. I got it. And I, because what was right there for me, Caesar, was what'd your friends say, right? Because I have friends that I'm clear and unclear. Two of you are like right in that group. Like if I called Dana and said, hi, I'm about to do something really stupid, right? Like if I just said that, you'd be like, where are you? Don't move. I'm coming to, I'm sending someone to come get you, right?
Yes.
You'd be like, don't move, right? And she said, oh, and this is the part that just broke my heart. She said, oh, well, my friends loved watching me drive up in my pimp's Mercedes.
Mm.
I sat in my car and I cried for 30 minutes.
Mm.
To think that her friends were more enamored by the car that she drove than what was happening to her.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so committed to having this conversation,
Yeah.
because our kids are interacting with one another, object to object versus person to person.
Like it's all about the flash.
And when we show our film, they have the experience of what it is to be in that girl's shoes. And it's emotional for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want anybody to feel like that.
Yeah.
And that's really what alters it for them, is it's no longer a thing. It's no longer a thing happening, something happening to us. It's actually something happening to a person that they happen to know.
Right. So like humanizing people.
So there are moments when I cry for sure, but God's given me some superpower that I can actually be with it. Mm-hmm. And if not, I'd be in a fetal position over in the corner. But my drive is, the more conversations we have, the more kids we actually can prevent going down a pathway that they can't come back from.
Yeah.
At least not the way they'd want to.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There are so many things that come to mind. And ever since I left my last job like 9 years ago, I started spending more time at home and had more time for myself, right? And I remember that's when I started wondering what else is going on in the world. And I started finding out about many things that are going on in the world that were very sad. Wars. Now you got airstrikes, right? Countries that we had, I couldn't find the reason why we went to war with, and then eventually finding out like there was this public deception and why we went to war, which has happened.
Look, war is always about public deception. Don't kid yourself. It's all about making money, and it's not us making money, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Vietnam, right? Everybody found out like that was based on a lie, and then weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And then you look at all the collateral damage, right? And I'm like, these are human beings, like women, children, and nowadays with the internet, you even can find footage of airstrikes happening, and like one moment they're there, the next moment
and then they're not.
There's
I don't want to watch that.
Right. I don't recommend it.
I don't want to watch
that. As a younger male myself, I couldn't help but like wonder, like, is that really happening? And I did watch some of that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, I took my mom to go see the movie Pearl Harbor when it first came out a long time ago.
Yeah.
And my dad was a World War II pilot, Navy pilot, right? And they were stationed in Morocco. And she remembers that that entire period of time, because she had been married to a military guy before my dad. And we're watching a movie, and she's like, that's exactly what happened. Like, they knew something was happening, and they didn't get the information to them soon enough. And I remember, Caesar, the 45-minute fight scene, I sobbed the whole time. Being with all the lives that were lost needlessly, and the impact on families and friends and the environment.
Right.
I mean, the scene where he's literally that guy's rowing a rowboat through the sea of bodies in the ocean. That's what it was like.
Yeah.
My dad's best friend was one of the very first aces in the Pacific War. He was there. He was actually up in the air when they came over the mountains, and I think he took 7 of them down, right? When he was being interviewed, they're like, why didn't you, it's so fascinating, why didn't you kill more? And Les was this very quiet, mild-mannered man. He goes, why would I do that? He was fully aware of what he was doing.
Yeah.
And the press wanted to know why he didn't take down more. It's like, that's a life. whether I agree with them or not, whether I believe the same or not. Still a life. You know, we'd say the same thing about 9/11. Those guys thought they were doing something right.
Exactly.
That's what they thought.
Right. And I love what you said, that they told you, well, what would make the difference, right? And they said awareness, you said, right? And that, and I've talked to a lot of people about this kind of thing over time, and I thought about it a lot myself. And I do think awareness is something that does make a big difference, because if you think about it, if you're like, and even in a closed gated community, right, and all of a sudden there's somebody doing something they really shouldn't be doing to someone, and they're right there in the middle of the community, right? And
Peter Nygaard,
what is
right?
that?
Oh my gosh!
I don't watch the news.
Jeffrey Epstein. We'll just go.
Yes,
you know who Jeffrey Epstein is?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein, middle of Palm Bay.
Right. Yeah.
Trafficked dozens and dozens and dozens of young girls.
Exactly.
If you've not seen this special on Netflix, highly recommend it.
Right.
It's very eye-opening and very telling to a couple of things, but one, the intentional recruitment and grooming of a particular type of young girl. You know, they mostly came from an underserved community, you know, broken homes, lots of vulnerabilities, which had them be even more vulnerable to someone telling them they're pretty, I'll pay you $200. You just have to give this guy a massage. I'm 14. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and for them to really have the distinction of, you know, being empowered by when someone has that conversation and it sounds too good to be true, it really kind of is, you know, and that's the thing, you know, human trafficking, there is no socioeconomic, there is no demographic, there is no geographic boundary. There was a girl a woman who came out of one of our safe homes here. She started being trafficked at the age of 40. And there was a story of another friend of mine who's a private investigator. He was on his way to Vegas. He was on the outside, you know, the emergency row seating, and there was an older gentleman in the middle, and it's like, I'll just call him Groovy Dude, you know, by the window. And if you weren't paying attention, you would think Groovy Dude was talking to the older guy, right? But Stephen, being a PI, was catching the conversation. You know, it's like, hey, you know, when we get to Vegas, we should get an Escalade, because I don't want to roll up into the Bellagio in a, you know, Chevrolet. And by the way, we're going to go by Ferragamo. You know, and this older gentleman, he's like just sitting in the middle, just shaking his head. You know, he wasn't really talking to him; we're talking at him. And Stephen, you know, went up and talked to the flight attendant and said, I think this guy's, you know, being held against his will. And sure enough, the guy was trafficking him for his money, and they were holding his family hostage.
Yeah.
75 years old. You know, so it's not just the young 13, 14-year-old girls and boys. You know, close to 30% are boys. It's, you know, really just about anyone that can be vulnerable. And I got to tell you, given the current time and environments and situation, it makes me super nervous. That's why I'm just so driven to be out with our kids, you know, to have these conversations, because our kids are so vulnerable right now. They're lonely and they're isolated and they miss their friends, and, you know, they're tired of this
the
thing.
Effect of like a restriction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had a 4-time increase of cyber tips from April 2019 to April 2020. It was 1 million to 4 million. There were 65 million cyber tips last year.
Wow.
Up from 20 million the year before. You can't tell me it wasn't affected. And there are people that will argue. They're like, well, maybe there was more reporting by Facebook. I don't care. I don't care who reported it. Yeah. It's still up. It's still up. Yeah. Threefold. You know, so that's why there's this the drive for me to get out in front of this, to get with as many kids as possible. Because the more conversations I have with kids, the more conversations our team has with youth and parents and teachers, the more awareness we can raise and literally save people's lives.
Yeah. That's it's so great, the information that you're sharing. I mean, I'm learning a lot myself, things that I didn't know, just hearing what you're saying. And then, and here's what I want to bring up right now, because I think it's the perfect spot, right? As a listener, I'd be like, wait a second, isn't this a podcast about love? Like, I'm not feeling the love right now. This is actually all very
Oh, they're
sad
feeling
and
the
right.
passion and the drive, right?
Yeah. So like, why are you all, or why are we having a conversation about like all these really messed up things in this podcast about love? And that is precisely the conversation that I want to have. Um, we spoke about awareness, right? And I do think, um, if something really messed up is happening right next to you, we do something about it. If you're with a group of your friends and classes, somebody's doing, and somebody's about to like do something really messed up, everybody kind of interrupts. Or if you're in the grocery store, and
Yeah.
like people, if it's like in our proximity, in our vicinity, like we stop, right? If there's an old lady on the
Yeah.
ground, she can't get up, we help her up, right? If somebody's
Yeah.
starving to death and they're right
What
next
there
to you,
is
you
to
got
do.
spare food, you give them some of your spare food. Is what we do, and we definitely saw it now, which is beautiful actually. Right now, in with the great quarantine of 2020, right? And so many people lost their jobs. I saw so many beautiful groups and social media forming about like, hey, whatever you need, don't be afraid
Yep.
to ask. We got you. And I'm like, where, like that, mind you, that's awesome, right? I don't want to discredit any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked myself, where's that kind of solidarity been with countries like Libya, like Yemen, right? That we've bombed to smithereens for political reasons. And and it goes back to what you said, right? Awareness. Now, what does any of this have to do with love? So, my question is, do you think that perhaps one of the things that gets in the way of awareness is the fact that maybe people have a hard time stomaching the things that are happening?
Yeah, of course. Of
Yeah.
course, when I first started this conversation 8 years ago, it was clear I want to talk to parents. That's what I want to talk to parents. And they
Yeah.
were like, la, 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 no,
Mhm.
And I used to get really feisty about it too. I'm like, look, I'm trying to save your kid's life, a little self-righteousy. And then I got some really good coaching. It's like, Jane, people they just can't even fathom, right? So you got to give people space and grace to be with the conversation. I was like, oh, okay. All right. I can take that on, and I also got a little feisty on the other side going, not a problem. I don't have a problem with people not being able to talk about this. It's okay. I'll go talk to your kids because the kids want it,
Yeah.
And I think the thing that, because I am going to pull it back to love for you, the thing that these predators know is we as human beings need love. We need camaraderie. We need togetherness. We need physical touch. There's been, so many studies done that if we don't, babies died in orphanages when they were held, so there is a biological need for connection. We're wired that way. Now, we don't come with handbooks, so what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. You can kind of get the same context, but we're each individual. So I think there's a lot of families that you've got, I think it's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys have been sexually assaulted by the age of 18. So if you do the math on that, you've probably got about 125 million people in the country wandering around hurt, right? And traumatized, and then not really manage that trauma because you don't talk about it, hush hush and quiet and all of that, and then they get married and then they have babies, right? So you've got trauma, generational trauma. And predators know this. So even if you're living in a great home, even if you have amazing parents that love you as best they can, there still might be some unfulfilled need. And y'all remember being teenagers, don't you? Like that angsty moments in time where maybe you had a couple extra pimples, or you had glasses versus contacts, and glasses are cool, or curly hair versus straight hair, no And then, right, no chest hair, then chest hair. We're still that gangly 5th or 6th grader with the braces and the curly hair and the glasses. And even though, we've developed into these beautiful young men and young women, the mindset is still that, right? So I'm still insecure, and yet I still need love, right? So it's the really need for human connection that currently we're not getting, and these predators are taking advantage of that. And so when we talk to parents, the thing I always share with them, and I always coach them, I'm like, look, your kids don't want another pair of Nikes, they want you. My daughter taught me that. She wanted me. Like, she loved shopping with me. It's not that, but she would much rather have me than shopping. Right? Kids just want us. That's all they want. They want us. They want us to love them. They want our attention. And you see it in grocery stores and swimming pools. Mom, watch. Dad, look at me. Right?
Yes.
Right? And so, what I coach parents is, just be with your kids. Go for a walk in nature. Right? Sit down and go through a book together. Color together. Paint together. Go sit outside and watch the ants build something together.
I love that.
Be with one another and discover what's happening out in the world. Watch the leaves fall on the oak trees right now. Look at the spring flowers coming up and the different colors and what kind of flower is that. And, be in wonder out in the world, and you'll learn so much about your children, and they'll learn so much about you. So when you create that safe space and you start to build those bonds in those moments, when something uncomfortable comes up, maybe they did send that picture because that cute boy asked him to, and then they regretted it afterwards because now he's asking for more pictures and I don't want to give him more pictures, right? I'm a hard no on that. And now I'm starting to get scared. But because I've spent all this time with my mom or all this time with my dad, looking at the ants and looking at the flowers and bonding over just life, I can take a deep breath and let my parent know what's happening and give them space and grace to react, right? We talked about that a little earlier today. When I coach the kids, I'm like, look, not that any of you would have sent out an inappropriate picture, right? Not that any of you would have done that. Have you had, though, and you do share that with your parents are more likely going to react. And I'll ask them, like, why do you think that? Oh, because, they'll go down that particular path. I'm like, well, consider. I'm like, I want you to consider something. You are their most precious thing in life. They would lay down their lives for you, and someone's trying to hurt you. I said, and for parents, everything's our fault. I don't care. I don't care if you're doing good. It's because of me. If something happened bad, it's because of me. We're just how parents are.
Yes.
And consider, they're upset because someone tried to hurt their baby. And you can just watch it wash over them. And they're like, because they've never even contemplated their parents being human before, having that kind of emotion. And with the parents, I share the same thing. I'm like, look, I said, when your kids come up and share this with you, you're going to have to practice what the NBA teaches the referees. They teach the referees to hold in, breathe in for 3 seconds before you blow that whistle, because you want to make sure your eyeball connected with your brain, with your memory of that's a foul or not, right? I tell you, just hold your breath, take a deep breath in, because those next few words can make or break your child's life, literally. They just come to you vulnerably and openly sharing something that they've done that they probably, remember that gut feeling we talked about? They probably knew they shouldn't have, felt pressured to do that, felt pressure to fit in. In that moment, you've got to take that deep breath and just look at them and have zero reaction, as challenging as that's going to be. Just go, it'll be okay, baby. We'll figure it out. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Even tone, take a deep breath. Now, you can go to the bathroom and scream into a pillow later, to get that out for yourself. But, our kids' prefrontal cortex is not developed until you're 25 or 28.
Yeah.
They really don't know any better.
Yeah.
So given that they have this need for love, given that they're in this isolated environment, and the parents, they're freaked out too, right? So they're picking up on that energy. like if everybody just takes a deep breath, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and
This is
just be
great.
like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. I'm here for you, baby. We'll work it out.
Yeah, what I'm seeing in this beautiful explanation of yours, Jen, is that instead of a foundation of love, there's the opportunity to give space to
Mm-hmm.
whatever ugly thing might show
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I love the analogy of the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just how it is in one particle, it's how it is in the whole, right? So
Mm-hmm.
perhaps that's how it is also in the world,
Yeah.
which takes us back to, why, like, what can we do about like everything that's going on out there, and how can we create a loving world? And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, I think we can't create a loving world if we don't deal with the places where love is missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
We're not,
I'm seeing.
we're an interesting species, as we know.
Mhm.
We something happens, we make something up about it, and
Yeah.
live that's a thing, right? Even though it's really not a thing.
Well,
Mhm.
how long ago did you have that moment in Ethiopia where you?
8 years ago this month.
I mentioned that, you guys, because I'm listening and I'm hearing something. Because Jan, what you do makes a difference, and we know that, and we love you,
Mhm.
and we appreciate you.
Mhm.
And the other side of having you on with us tonight is who you are in the
Mhm.
world, how you be in the face of, 8 years ago, you had this moment where you saw something that you had no idea existed before.
Mhm.
And there's a process that you went through. There's like shock, there's denial, there's anger, right?
Mhm.
And Jan is human. Like, you went through that for yourself.
Absolutely.
And you ongoingly go through that. There are new things that come up that put you through that process. And you can hear it with Jan. And I've been listening to you, Jan, and I've been quiet and I've been watching you, and I've been inspired by, there's a space where you stand of, after you go through that shock, anger, denial, there's a space. Well, there's also the passion. And
Mhm.
and it gets confused with this space where I hear you coming from, which is a space of acceptance
Mhm.
and peace.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And don't confuse that with being like
Mm-mm.
not in action or
Mm-mm. No.
passive. No.
Mhm.
And there's a place where you're coming from, and I'm learning from it, is like a stand that you are that is unmovable
Mhm.
because you've gone through those spaces
Yes.
and you've come to a place of power, and only in that place of power can you really do something about it, because you've accepted it. And I hate to use that word because people hear it so passive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
Like giving it
you know,
approval,
yeah,
right? Which is
it's
not there.
really
Yes,
great.
like it makes
Yeah.
it okay that you accept it. Exactly, Caesar.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
where you are. There's nothing
No.
about it that you're
No.
saying is okay about.
Mhm.
Well, it's actually more in the realm of compassion.
That's
And
exactly what it is.
yeah, and I'm because I'll share with people, I can actually have compassion for the traffickers, for the pimps.
You have to.
And
Tell
it's
us
like,
more about that.
it's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you gotta look. People don't wake up one morning and go, I'm gonna sell people today. Yep, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go kidnap some girls and
Right.
lure them in and harm them, and I'm gonna sell them. Yep, you don't wake up that way.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
it's there are something happened, and
Right.
one of the very first conferences I went to a session by Homeland Security, and they shared that of the traffickers and pimps they've arrested, close to 95% of them were psychopaths
Mhm.
and had disassociation disorder, depersonalization disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because of the level of abuse they'd experienced as a child. That empathy from here just got cut off. It's done. Just done. and this one pimp, he had been given 3 life sentences for trafficking 3 young girls. And, the Homeland Security agent said, he goes, you could just see on his face, he was just pure disbelief. He just didn't get it. Like really, really didn't understand it. And, he asked the agent if he could talk to him. And they're like, sure, and he goes, let me get this straight. I'm going to jail for pimping hoes. Like his brain was so wired in a particular way that for him, selling women was like selling a water bottle. There was no distinction for him.
Yeah.
You're not born that way. That gets developed over time. Right. Something happened
Jen,
over and over and over again.
That thing you just said about like how they can't feel. The same thing can happen to us towards those people. And that's what you're pointing to, is that we have an opportunity for huge compassion. Now, I do have another question, okay, Caesar? I'm just going to jump in with this one.
Yeah, do it.
Why are we not hearing about this? Why is it not on the headlines of why does nobody know about this if the whole world is being run? How many billions of dollars? I don't even know how much money that is. How much billions of dollars?
Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 facts and then one that's going to blow your mind. So it's the fastest growing crime in the world behind guns. It has now surpassed drugs. It's $150 billion industry worldwide. Now that's all trafficking, including labor, right? And the average age of entry in the United States is 11 to 14 years old. Okay. Now, if you recall, your parents or your grandparents probably talked about, and culturally, it's a different conversation, but it sounds something like, that's not my business. We don't share our dirty laundry with neighbors. Niches get stitches and get tossed in ditches, right? Every culture's got some iteration of that, is that what happens in your house, you don't talk about to anybody, regardless of what's happening, because you'll look bad, or, you'll be judged, or God forbid your children will be taken away. And that's, the worst thing that can happen. So, this has been going on for centuries, so it's not new. 2, it's this hush conversation. And, I'm glad Jeffrey Epstein finally was arrested. I'm glad Ghislaine was finally arrested. I'm glad Peter Nygaard, and you'll have to look him up, was finally arrested. This guy makes Jeffrey Epstein look like a kindergartner. Wow. He's been trafficking women since 1972. Yeah. Around the world. And it's interesting because I was just speaking with one of the survivors that came forward to file the class action lawsuit against Peter Nygaard that actually put him in jail in Canada. And there's still this victim shaming. This man sexually assaulted and abused thousands of women, right? A handful of them happen to be in the Bahamas, and they're victim shamed. They are decimated in society because somehow it's their fault. So if you go and you look at that, if I'm a little girl or a little boy and something happened to me and I'm watching that person experience that, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to talk about it. I'll suffer because the consequences seem way worse. And so there's this hush, don't tell anybody. Then we still have this victim shaming thing going on, right? And then you've got all this money and power associated with it.
And then like people like you are like screaming at the top of the mountains.
Right.
For people to hear.
Yes.
And we'll keep screaming. I feel like I told people, I feel like Horton Hears a Who. You guys remember that cartoon, Horton Hears a Who? There's a whole little world on a little dandelion flower. And Horton's the only one that can hear him because of his big elephant ears, right? And all the other animals in the jungle want to boil this little dust speck, right? And the entire town is screaming, "We are here, we are here, we are here!" And there's this one teenage boy that's, I'm not going to participate, until finally he sees the light and he, walks up to the thing and he adds his voice, and that's the voice that breaks the bubble and everyone can hear him, right? That's what I feel like sometimes is there's been so many people that have gone before me, and somehow I was that last little voice. I wasn't being an obstinate teenager, but it was like that last little voice that it's finally starting to break through, that finally more and more people are wanting to have this conversation. I'm getting a lot of calls from schools going, Jan, can you come in and talk to us? Can we figure out how to do something on Zoom?
It's amazing.
Can we, what can we do? Because the environment has caused, high rates of suicide, right? People are out of jobs. I'm really nervous, quite frankly, for the next year. I am. Not because of really the political environment, but more of how are we going to get all these people back to work? What are we going to do about the mortgage moratorium? If we have 40 million people homeless, where are they going to go? And then what are you going to do with all those empty houses? I mean, I have all those kinds of questions. So the more we can educate ourselves, the more we can have compassion for one another, for what people are going through. And the more we can look, if I've got a loaf of bread and I split it 3 ways with you, that's 2 other people I've just fed, including myself, right? I'll share my jar of peanut butter too. That simple act of kindness could actually save the world. Just that one thing. And I think that more and more people just really start to look up and out and be like, gosh, how can I might not have a bunch, right? But, can I make a couple of baggies of peanut butter sandwiches and a bottle of water? And if I'm, driving to work and I can hand that baggie to the homeless man or woman standing there. That one little simple act can literally make a difference. Yeah.
And man, this conversation is opening so much up for me. And it's like, as this conversation has transpired, I'm starting to see like a new axis and what would make a difference in having us be able to be with the darkness that's out there so that we can actually deal with it collectively and start to transform it. And what I see is, because the people that I want to say something, right? Because at one point I said something, it might sound like those people that turn a blind eye, that prefer to like not look at it, right? I'm not blaming them either, right? I can empathize with them and understand where they're at too, right?
It's difficult. It's a difficult topic,
right?
And that's where bringing the compassion actually opens more space for people to do that.
Exactly, and that's what I was seeing where I'm like, wow, like compassion is really the key, because it's so easy to get so angry. I remember for me, right? Like I happened to early in life meet several women, girls that had experienced rape, and that there was a single thing that would piss me off more in the world than hearing about that. Like the moment somebody told me, I would boil, and I could even feel myself like, if I were there, like I would so easily like pull the trigger, bash somebody's head in with a bat. I don't care, right? But it wasn't until I did the Landmark Forum, where I sat there with 150 people over 3 days, and I remember thinking about alcoholism, and I've had several family members that had alcoholism in their lives, and I saw some of the impact on other family members, and I used to just make it so wrong. Like, I think alcoholism is the most stupid illness. I can't believe they call it an illness, because that's something that you do yourself. I mean, you literally grab the bottle and put it in your mouth, right? You can't tell me that's an illness. And then it wasn't until I was sat there in the Landmark Forum that I realized, when we got into the genesis of your identity, right? Like how you became the way you became. And I had a similar kind of epiphany, like you shared earlier, Jen, where I'm like, wow, those people, if I were in their shoes, with their life, with their circumstances, their influences, their upbringing, I would have made the same decisions they made, because they didn't have a choice in the matter, right? And
you do it your own way. That's the thing too.
Yeah.
Like stuff we're judging people, like the turning a blind eye. I do that. I've
Right.
done that.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah, you know what? We all have. Yes, so funny.
And
We all
but
have.
for
There's
sure.
there's stuff we can't be with. And I was having this conversation yesterday with a mutual friend of all of ours, and I said, I don't have to understand stuff. I don't. What I can do is give space and grace for humanity.
Mm.
Right? I'm not gay. I don't get it. I don't get it. But it doesn't mean I can. It doesn't mean I'll judge it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't understand it doesn't mean I can't be with it and give space and grace for it.
Exactly.
You know, and that right there opens up such a space for people to feel safe, to share with what they're dealing with. A friend of mine asked me to watch Pose. It's 2 seasons. I don't know if you've seen it, but it gave me such insight for that community that I had no idea about. And I was like, wow. You know, again, my brain can't quite comprehend it, and it's okay. I don't understand quantum physics either.
Yeah,
and I don't
suddenly
understand
you don't really need
aerodynamics.
to.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's like I don't need to. I can just give humanity, that human, the space and grace to be exactly where they are, exactly how they are.
Yes.
And not and just be with it. Like just like I'm going to be with here's my water bottle. Yes, it's a it's a peacock, but like just be with it. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to assess it. I don't have to do anything with it. I don't even have to have an opinion about it.
Yeah.
You be with it.
Exactly. Yeah, I wrote that down when you said it at first. And you know what the next thing that opened up for me was in the Landmark Forum is after seeing that they had no choice. They just did what they did, right, based on their entire past. And I'm the observer, like judging, right, like all arrogant.
We always
right?
do.
That's where I'm like, wow, if I'm the one that sees that they have a choice, instead of pointing the finger over there and judging them, why don't I actually extend a hand and see how I can make a difference and support them where they are, right? And I could see how without having that sort of a shift in consciousness of compassion, I could see how it would be very challenging for people to be with a lot of the things that are happening that we've talked about, right? And they would get angered and hate the perpetrators, right? So that's where I was starting to see the access.
If and here's the other thing too, right? Is there's a space for forgiveness. But if you've never been violated before, right? Even robbed, if you've never been robbed before, if you've never, whether it's been sexually violated, verbally violated, you have a really hard time comprehending that space, right? But mostly something's happened to everybody, right? It might not be at gunpoint, it might not be rape, it might not be abuse, but a lingering experience. We can at least comprehend that. When our best friend, stole our boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And that betrayal and that sense of anger and frustration. Though there's all those moments in life that each of us have experienced, and yet somewhere along the way we can find forgiveness for that person. And you keep looking as like what would what's going on over there such that person chose that path. I don't know. Like what you said, you discovered, if I lived that life, I probably would have done the same thing.
Not even probably. It's exactly what I would.
Yeah. Well, you could have done drugs. You could have done cutting. You could, you could have gambled. You could have done a bit of sex. I mean, there's millions of ways that you could have self-medicated, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol just happened to be that person's choice, but to be able to really see how much more alike we are than different, how much that we really do need one another.
It's so powerful. I want to point to something too, Jan, that you've been pointing at is your conversation, your problems are really these big problems. And it's inspiring to listen to. It's a little like not overwhelming, but you don't hear people talking about what you're talking about, right? So I just wanted to point to that, and the opportunity that you're pointing to open our hearts and be interested in what we're not interested in, is what we all want. We all want to be a human family. That's who we are. We want to be loved, and we want to be supported, and we want to be in community. And these things can separate us. Like, we've all been pretty angry, and that's why we brought you on the show, Jan. It's been very divisive. It's been very confronting. It's been very upsetting, and it's going to keep going. You woke up to this 8 years ago. There are people that don't even know about this. There are people that are going to find out tomorrow. There are people that are going to find, and we're the ones that are there, like you said, Caesar. We're there, like, watching people. We're observing it now. So we have a responsibility. We can either say, you're drinking the bottle.
Yeah, and it's and that's part of what our education does for the kids is what I leave them with is actions, and it's not, you can't be a bystander anymore. Can't be. I give you actions to take. I give you phone numbers back to the hotline, which I promise you I will get to. I give people actions to take that. And for me, like, once you know what human trafficking is, right? And once you have a sense of what the signs are, then I can actually start to see what to look for. And then I can take an action. And that action is, I share with people the hotline number, which is 888-3737-888. And if you're listening to this podcast in your car, do not pull over and put this phone number in your car. Just replay it or write it down somewhere. And if you're listening to this podcast at home, put the number in your phone. It's the National Trafficking Hotline number. And the moment you call it, they'll say, "Are you okay?" Right? And you'll be like, "Yep, I'm at the corner of X and Y. I'm at the XYZ convenience store, and something just doesn't feel right. There's two girls standing off to the side. They're inappropriately dressed. It's the middle of the day. It just feels weird," right? And then they'll instruct you from there. And then I tell people, if someone's stuffing someone in a car, or someone screaming, "Not my father," it's an evident, that's not a I go, you call 911, take a picture of the license plate if you can. And I'm like, don't go in. The sense would be to go in and save someone. It's like, no. There are trained professionals that are moments away, right?
Yeah.
Do what you could. You picked up the phone, you called 911, till you took a picture of the license plate, until you get a description of people. Yeah. That right there will save a life, right? Because we can no longer be bystanders. And when people are empowered to know what to do, that alters their experience of themselves. Because every single time we talk in public or on a podcast, I'll get a ping on one of my social media platforms and be like, "Jan, I called the number. Thank you." Right? I gave them something to do, because there's people that have also seen something and not known what to do and have lived with that regret ever since. And so knowing what to look for, knowing to look for emaciation, knowing to look for, there's a difference between shy and submissive, right? Submissive is this whole enveloping of the energy. Shy is just kind of like this, right? And trusting your gut. That's what I tell people, that the most, you've got more neural receptors in your gut than you do in your brain. Trust your gut. If something feels off, pay attention. Take a picture, call the number. And there's every single survivor we've ever talked to has said, "I wish someone would have picked up the phone and called."
Yeah. Wow.
And we get to be that person. And that's, to me, one of the most selfless acts a human being can do for another human being, is take that risk and pick up the phone and make the call.
Yeah. I love this, because we get so programmed, like you said earlier, to, don't get involved, turn away, don't talk to strangers, mind your own business. Right. And yeah, I think I'm actually seeing that break down little by little, which I love. Talk to strangers. I think you discover who you are the most when you're actually talking to strangers, which is great. And there's something I want to share. I love sharing about the lessons that I've received from plant medicine in this podcast as well. And I think I mentioned a little bit to you, Jan, when we spoke earlier, when I was in ceremony one time. This was earlier on. And I had a pretty challenging ceremony or journey where I was feeling the burden of a lot of the suffering that's going on in the world. And I'm talking to the point where it felt physically heavy that I couldn't even breathe. I would have such a hard time breathing. And I actually collapsed a couple of times, maybe 3 times. And the facilitator got worried. And I actually remember having the experience and the thought, like, this is not worth it. Like, I was ready to go. Like, I think when I collapsed would be because I would start to separate from my body in some way. Like, it's like my spirit wanted to just, I didn't want to be with all the suffering that was happening.
Yeah.
And then I'd have moments and it was just so heavy. I remember experiencing myself like being a starving child, being a woman in labor, and just so many different things. And at one point I'm laying there and I start hearing this thump and this buzz of an ohm. and all of a sudden, out of a psychedelic background, right, like all this mesh colors. I think I spoke about her in an earlier episode. I call her the psychedelic hula dancer because she would just sway. It's like she came out
psychedelic
like right
hula dancer. I love it.
Some entity. Yeah. She says to me, like through the buzz, she was humming and dancing very slowly, side to side, swaying, where she just kind of, she couldn't interrupt what she was doing. It was like she was holding up the reality of this dimension or something. And she says, "You're avoiding and indulging." And I'm like, how could I be indulging in any of this? Like, this isn't a pleasant thing for me. How can you call this indulgence? And I was just kind of sat with it longer, and I'm like, oh wow, I could see how me wallowing in all this, it's like I'm intentionally indulging. It's like I'm getting some sort of a payoff by just wallowing. And now I start to see the avoiding part. Like, wow, I could see how my wallowing and my just feeling really bad about it all has me not do anything productive that could actually impact what's going on, right? Like with you, Jen, you could have just been so upset with what you saw 8 years ago that just like would have you avoid the like any of it, right? But instead, you didn't indulge in it. You didn't indulge in sadness. And
I was mad when he told me. I was mad. Like, what are you talking about? People are selling people.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Look, this is like the 2000s, whatever. Like, this is not the 1800s. This is the 1500s. Exactly. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's one thing that still brings me tons of value now for so many different aspects of my life, with work, with stuff like this, where whenever I'm like on some funk, I'm like, oh, I'm avoiding and indulging. Let me get into action. Right. And then she said this other thing, which I've been unpacking ever since. She said, solve it in yourself. Right. And I'm like, wait a second. So like what's going on out there in the world, like I can solve it in here somewhere with myself. And I bring that up because of what we said about what we could call the perpetrators, right? If you look at it from a spiritual perspective, right, you could take on that this whole reality is a construct of your own consciousness, right? And it's one of the things I got to tell you that, and I talked a lot with Zaina about this, that made the biggest difference for me in 2020 when I was upset at a lot of the things that were happening. I shifted from pointing fingers on like, we shouldn't be doing this. My clients' businesses are getting shut down. Employees are getting sent home. What do you mean this? What do you mean that? Yeah. I shifted to, okay, where am I responsible for what's happening? Like where, if there is some darkness perpetrating anything out there, like why don't I turn my attention inward and look at where am I harboring darkness, and bring love, compassion there where I might be.
Well, and it's responsibility.
Exactly.
The responsibility of who we be in the world impacts the world.
Yeah. It's so valuable, everything that you shared, Jen. Really, thank you so much.
And Caesar, I want to say something too.
Yes.
That question is what got you to create this.
Mm-hmm.
Question.
That question, that us getting to a place of like, where can we be responsible? And like you said, Jen, responsible, and then it had you create this show.
Yeah.
Because then we started taking actions to where we wanted to stand. And one of the things for you was love is our nature. That is that's what you're out to share with the world.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and it definitely wasn't coming up when I was just in reaction mode, upset at everything, and so I think that's one of the biggest takeaways out of the conversation today is maybe there is no such thing as a perpetrator, and we can learn to have compassion and take responsibility for everything that's happening. Not like to blame ourselves, but just discover what.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept of maybe there's no perpetrator. No. If you hurt me, that's not okay. All right.
Sure.
However, you can look at what role did we as a society play in having that happen. Black Panther is one of my daughter's favorite movies, right? And if you look at the cousin that showed up, he was left to fend for himself. His father was taken away from him. The environment called for him to become who he was as a society, as a group of human beings that might have been in that neighborhood at the time. That's on us. We created that. Took his family, lived on the street, made him a warrior.
Exactly.
So there's that kind of responsibility we can take.
I love that. I love that. We shift from they, right, pointing that way, to we. We.
Yeah.
And you could even go deeper to me. Because at the end of the day, that's the only place you can do any kind of work.
Yeah.
So,
I can't do it. It's like I tell people I make my bed every morning. That's the one thing I can actually physically control.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Well, amazing. Jan, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to share with people. Is there any way besides calling 888-3737-888 when they see something sketchy? Is there anything they can do to support what you're up to, support paving the way? Please share with us.
Absolutely. Well, that's the National Trafficking Hotline number. That is not my number. It's not what I do. That's a whole separate organization funded by the government. So people can find me on social media, right? So I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.
What is your Instagram?
Instagram is @PavingW. Facebook is @PavingW or Jan Edwards. And then LinkedIn is Paving the Way Foundation and then Jan Edwards. I just joined Clubhouse on Sunday. Jan Edwards. I'm there too.
Right.
And our website is pavingthewayfoundation.org. And we've got dozens of resources on there. We have a parent toolkit parents can download. We've got a teen tech talk that's a one sheet of all the apps that predators use trying to lure our kids in and some of the recruitment tactics. We have some little videos. We've got volunteer forms. There are so many resources on our website that people can download for free, and we just invite them to engage in the conversation. I get it's uncomfortable. I always take my glasses off to make a point so I can look in the camera. I get it's uncomfortable, and that's why we're here, right? Really, that's why we're here, is to help you cross over that bridge of not being okay and having uncomfortable conversations to being okay with having uncomfortable conversations and being empowered about it. And that's all it takes. One conversation can literally save a life. And that's why we've created all these tools to empower people to have those conversations and be okay, right? It's okay if you've got body sensations. It's okay if your heart's palpitating and your palms are sweaty. Your kids are going to thank you.
Maybe what you're saying is going to answer this question. Because the last question I had for you is your superpower, right? You alluded earlier, maybe you have a superpower where you can just be with it. Right.
I do actually have several superpowers, but one of my I'd say my biggest superpower is I am a natural connector. If you need something like in this space, right? I may not know. I may not have that contact, but I promise you one of my contacts has that contact.
Exactly.
And so,
Awesome.
I know people, my superpower.
And the superpower of just being able to be with it all. Is that
Yeah,
superpower available to other people too?
it is available to other
How
people.
can they tap
of course.
into it? Tell us.
Well, they can go register for the Landmark Forum.
That's one way.
I'm just saying.
It's a really good start, actually. We could say so much, but it's a great start.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, look,
we'll have to do a whole episode on that.
Well, Zana and I can't. You can though.
There you go.
Yeah, it's age is a hell of a price to pay for wisdom, right? And over time, and really starting to understand how human beings work and how human beings operate, you start to bring compassion for that. And when you lose your parents, right, you become, whether it's an only child or only children, and you're it, you realize the value, all the gifts they gave you, which has you be far more grateful and compassionate than you were probably when they were around. Mm-hmm. And so part of that's maturity, part of that's training. I've been on a personal growth and development quest for over 30 years. So all of it, there's extraordinary books out there. There's amazing
What's
coaches
your number
out
one
there.
book recommendation, Jan?
Ooh, my number one book or my,
or somebody who's into personal growth?
I have to. I have to. Yeah. The Road Less Traveled.
The Road Less Traveled.
Mm-hmm. Road Less Traveled, phenomenal book. The very first sentence in the very first chapter is life is hard. And the moment you really get that, everything else is piece of cake. It's like, whoa, right? Truth bomb right there, first chapter. Then the other book is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. Yeah, begin with the end in mind.
Right.
It's and actually it's kind of how I run my life. I've actually written my eulogy. So that's the future I'm living into. Everything I wrote down in there. Jan's known for this. Jan's got a Tony Award. Jan.
How did I not tell you to bring that?
Why not? Why not create that as a future to live into? Right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
I gotta write my eulogy.
I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Zana, closing thoughts.
I think the biggest thing is this is a huge opportunity for us to grow into our compassion for humanity and to be leaders in grace, in compassion, and in love. Thank you for being that, Jan. You are a leader in grace, in compassion, and love.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you both for inviting me to be on. This was fun. It was so great being with both of you. Yeah.
That was great. I love you both. I admire you for your compassion, for the space that you grant people, for the space that you grant humanity. Thank you for being beacons of love out in the world. And I'm just privileged to know you. So thank you all. Any last words for you, Jan?
Just, go out and make a difference wherever you can tomorrow. So that's all there is. Smile at somebody.
Fantastic.
Make a phone call. If somebody you haven't talked to in a while, you'll make their day. Super simple stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening to the Love is Our Nature podcast. You can follow Jan on Instagram. Go to her website, pavingthewayfoundation.org. Thank you, Zana, for being here. We'll definitely have you back. Jan, you're always invited back. And just have a fantastic rest of your day, rest of your week. We love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a valued listener. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the podcast in whatever your favorite platform is. You can also watch the video version of the episode on the Love is Our Nature YouTube channel. Check out loveisOurNature.com as well. That's where you can see our latest news and most recent content. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, share it with your friends, or email me. I love hearing what you took away for yourself out of listening. My email is Caesar@loveIsOurNature.com. That's CESAR, or Cesar, like my mother says it, at loveIsOurNature.com altogether. Till next time, I'll be here rooting for you. And remember, whatever the question, love is the answer.